There is a particular kind of tiredness that does not want silence. It wants a voice it has heard before, a room it already knows the shape of, a story whose turns it can feel coming without having to watch for them. For a great many people, that voice belongs to a drunk old man and the grandson he drags across the multiverse. And there is a reason. When you have seen these episodes enough times, the plot stops asking anything of you. Rick burps mid-sentence, and you do not need to open your eyes to know the expression on Morty's face. The portal gun makes its sound. Somewhere, a version of this family is arguing in a kitchen, and the argument is so familiar that it becomes a kind of lullaby, the way rain on a window becomes one. The way a car engine settles a child in the back seat. You are half awake. You do not need the whole thing. You just need it to be there. Tonight is about the man at the center of all of it, and about the strange fact that there is no single man at the center of all of it. Rick Sanchez is not one person. He is a species of person, repeated across a number of realities that the series itself declines to count. And this piece will move slowly through those versions, the ones named and the ones only glimpsed, and ask what it means that our Rick may not even be the Rick we began with. You are listening to Paper Town, where old stories are told slowly so that you can rest inside them. There is nothing here you need to keep up with. Let the lamp be low. Let the volume sit just under the surface of your attention, where a voice becomes weather. Settle into whatever holds you, and let the first of the many Ricks arrive on his own time. Begin with a single letter and a number, because that is where the whole architecture of this show quietly announces itself. In the 7th episode of the first season, Raising Gazorpazorp, Rick introduces himself to a group of aliens as Rick Sanchez from Earth Dimension C-137. It is a small line tossed off the way a person might give a street address, but it is the first time the series names the place these characters come from. And in naming it, the show admits something enormous. If your home has a label like a filing code, then there must be other homes with other codes. A dimension called C-137 only makes sense inside a system that expects a C-138 and a C-136, and a stack of realities reaching in every direction, each one cataloged, each one real. The naming is casual. The implication is not. Think about what that lettering is actually doing. It treats the universe the way a librarian treats a shelf. Every reality is a copy with a slightly different call number, and it asks you to hold in the back of your mind that there are effectively endless versions of this family living endless variations of this life. That is the premise the rest of the series will lean on over and over, and it is worth sitting with before anything more complicated arrives. There is not one Rick. There are, in principle, infinite Ricks, each the product of a universe that branched a little differently, each brilliant, each dangerous, each alone, in roughly the same way. Now go back one episode, because the series had already made this idea deadly serious before it ever gave the dimension a name. In Rick Potion number 9, the 6th episode of the first season, Morty asks his grandfather to fix a love potion, and the fix goes catastrophically wrong. The entire population of their home dimension is transformed into monsters, twisted into shapes the fans came to call Cronenberged. It is the kind of mistake that cannot be undone. And so Rick does the only thing his understanding of the multiverse allows. He and Morty abandon that reality entirely. They travel to a parallel dimension where the same disaster never happened, a dimension in which a version of Rick and a version of Morty have just died, and they take those dead versions' places. They bury the bodies, they walk into the house, they sit down at the dinner table and become the family. Let that settle, because it changes everything that follows. The Rick and the Morty an audience watches from here on are not the Rick and Morty from the first 5 episodes. Those originals ruined their world and left it behind. The pair we follow are replacements, living in a house that was never theirs, in a dimension that is not their birth dimension, sleeping in beds that belong to 2 people they watched die. The series does not pause to grieve this. It simply continues, and the ordinariness of the continuation is the horror of it. When a series tells you early that its protagonists are interchangeable with any of 1,000 near-identical copies, and then proves it by swapping them out and never looking back, it has told you how little it believes any single version matters. The multiverse is not a backdrop here. It is a moral condition. If every Rick is expendable and every Rick is a genius, then a natural question arises. What happens when a large number of them decide to organize? The answer comes late in the first season, in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, which premiered on the 7th of April 2014. Here the audience meets the governing body of the Ricks, given on screen the full name of the Trans-Dimensional Council of Ricks. The idea behind it is grimly logical. Every Rick, by virtue of being a Rick, is a target. Enemies like the Galactic Federation would happily wipe out any version they could find. So thousands of alternate Ricks band together for mutual protection, and from that alliance they build an institution. Consider what kind of institution a group of identical geniuses would actually construct. The council governs from a shared headquarters called the Citadel, and it does not bother with the separation of powers. It acts as lawmaker, judge, jury, and executioner all at once. It writes the rules, decides who has broken them, and carries out the sentence. And in one of its sharpest and strangest touches, it assigns Mortis to Ricks. The grandsons are treated as issued equipment, distributed by a central authority to the men who need them. A civilization of the smartest beings in existence, when left to design its own society, produces a bureaucracy that hands out children. The council's first act on screen is to come after one of their own. They accuse Rick C-137 of murdering 27 alternate dimension Ricks and of kidnapping their Mortys. The accusation is serious, but the framing is what matters. A great deal of the council's hostility toward him comes down to the fact that he had refused to join them, refused to take part in council affairs at all. He would not be governed. To a body built on the premise that Ricks must stick together to survive, a Rick who wants nothing to do with the collective is not merely a suspect. He is an insult to the entire idea. The council needs every Rick to accept that he is one of many. C-137 behaves as though he is the only one who counts, and the institution cannot forgive that. This is where the series begins to answer the question underneath all of this. If there are infinite Ricks, why does the audience care about this one? Why do some Ricks seem to matter more than others? Part of the answer is simply the one we follow, the one the camera stays with. But part of it is that C-137 refuses the logic of interchangeability that the multiverse imposes on everyone else. The council exists to say no single Rick is special. He exists to prove otherwise, mostly through spite. The conflict does not stay contained to one episode. In the premiere of the third season, The Rickshank Rickdemption, which aired on the 1st of April, 2017, our Rick finds himself in the custody of the Galactic Federation, and his escape becomes something far larger than a jailbreak. As part of getting himself free, he orchestrates the destruction of the Council of Ricks and the Citadel itself. The governing body that had put him on trial, the seat of Rick civilization, the whole apparatus that distributes Mortis and enforces the rules, is brought down in a single move by the one Rick who never wanted to belong to it. It is worth noticing how personal the scale of that is. A man tears down an entire interdimensional government partly to escape prison and partly, one suspects, because he could. Yet the Citadel does not stay dead, and this is one of its most pointed choices. In the 7th episode of the 3rd season, an episode titled on screen as Tales from the Citadel, and known more widely as the Ricklantis Mix-Up, which aired on the 10th of September 2017, the audience returns to a rebuilt Citadel of Ricks. The society has reassembled itself, and now, in the absence of the council that was wiped out, it holds a presidential election. The genius civilization tries democracy. The series follows that experiment with a cold eye, and the mere fact that the Citadel came back, differently organized but recognizably the same, tells you that the impulse to build institutions out of infinite copies of one man is not easily killed. You can destroy the council. You cannot destroy the need for one. All of this, though, rests on a hidden assumption that the series does not expose until much later, and when it does, the floor drops out. In the finale of the 5th season, Rick Mirai Jack, which aired on the 5th of September, 2021, Evil Morty reveals the existence of something called the Central Finite Curve. The curve is a barrier, and what it encloses is very specific. It walls off only those universes in which some version of Rick is the smartest being alive. Every reality inside it is a reality where a Rick sits at the top. The implication is precise and devastating. The portal guns, the very tool that lets these characters treat the multiverse as a set of doors, only function for travel within the curve. That is why every Rick, a portal-traveling character, has ever met is guaranteed to be the smartest being in his reality. It was never the whole infinite multiverse. It was a curated subset, a garden pruned to contain nothing but Ricks on thrones. Sit with how that reframes the lettered dimensions and the infinite Ricks and the Council and the Citadel. All of it took place inside a fence, a region deliberately shaped so that Rick would always be the most important thing in it. The premise of endless variation was true, but it had been filtered. At the end of Rick Morty Jack, evil Morty overcharges the Citadel's own dimensional drive and rips it through the barrier, tearing a hole in the Central Finite Curve and stepping out into the wider multiverse beyond it, the part that was never selected for Ricks at all. And in the 6th episode of the 6th season, the curve is shown restored, the fence rebuilt around the garden once more. The series reveals its cage, lets one character walk out of it, and then quietly closes it again behind him. That is the ground the rest of this video will stand on. Consider where the story we follow actually begins. Not with a birth, not with an origin told in flashback, but with an old man and a boy stepping sideways into another world. The pilot episode of Rick and Morty premiered on Adult Swim on the 2nd of December, 2013, written by the series creators Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland and directed by Roiland himself. And the first real errand of the show, the thing Rick drags his grandson across dimensional space to accomplish, is small and strange in equal measure. He takes Morty to another dimension to get seeds. That is the shape of the opening gesture. A grandfather who can breach the walls between realities uses that power for something closer to gardening than to conquest. Hold on to that detail, because it tells you what kind of freedom Rick has. Other dimensions are not, for him, a rare and sacred passage. They are a place to run to for supplies. The membrane that separates one universe from the next is, in his hands, something you cross the way another man might cross the street. This is established before we know anything else about him. Before we understand his intelligence, his drinking, his cruelty, we understand his mobility. He is a man for whom no single world is the only world. And yet the series gives him a home, and the home has its own gravity. In the pilot, Morty's parents consider putting Rick in a retirement home. The reason is domestic and completely ordinary. He has been keeping Morty away from school to help him in his lab. Think about the collision inside that sentence. Here is a man who can fetch seeds from a parallel reality, and the people he lives with are measuring him against the yardstick of a truant note and a spare bedroom. The family sees a difficult old relative disrupting a teenager's education. The audience sees something closer to a god idling in a garage. The distance between those two readings is the engine of the early series, and the garage, the house, the school, this one ordinary suburban dimension, becomes the fixed point against which all of Rick's boundlessness is measured. For a while, the series lets you assume that fixed point is permanent. You settle into it. The house is the house. The family is the family. When Rick disappears through a portal, you expect him to come back to the same kitchen, the same daughter, worrying about the same things. That assumption is the ground you stand on, and the show knows you are standing on it, which is why Rick Potion number 9 is where the floor gives way. Rick Potion number 9 originally aired on Adult Swim on the 27th of January, 2014. It was written by Justin Roiland and directed by Steven Sandoval. The premise begins as low comedy, the kind of small want that drives 100 sitcom plots. Morty wants a girl named Jessica, and he asks his grandfather for help, and Rick, in a moment that looks almost tender, gives him a love potion so that Morty can win her over. This is the setup for a farce. A boy, a crush, a dose of something from the lab. You know the beats of this story, or you think you do. The serum backfires. That is the whole turn, stated plainly, and everything that follows unrolls from it. What was meant to make one girl love one boy escapes its intended target and spreads, and Rick's attempt to fix it makes it worse in a way that is grotesque and total. His correction creates monsters. The series reaches, in its design, toward the films of David Cronenberg, toward bodies that fold and swell and become something that should not be, and it fills the world with these Cronenberg-inspired creatures. The town Morty grew up in becomes a landscape of writhing flesh. The love potion, the smallest and most human of wants, has metastasized into a plague. Now watch the two responses, because the gap between them is the moral core of the episode. Rick is, the episode makes clear, okay with the Cronenberg outcome. He is not devastated. He is not paralyzed by guilt. The world has curdled into a living nightmare and he regards it with something close to a shrug. Morty, by contrast, feels partly responsible for what they have made. He is a boy who wanted a girl to like him, and he is now carrying the weight of a ruined planet on the understanding that his want set it in motion. One of them feels the horror. The other has apparently felt this kind of horror too many times before to feel it again. And here is where the episode does the thing that reorganizes the entire series. Faced with a world he has broken past repair, Rick does not fix it. He locates a parallel dimension instead. In this other reality, an alternate Rick and an alternate Morty had just cured an identical disaster, solved the exact catastrophe our two are standing in the middle of. But those two, the ones who succeeded, were then killed in an explosion while finishing Rick's garage invention. So there is a version of this world where the Cronenberg plague was beaten, and in that version, the Rick and the Morty who beat it are freshly dead, leaving two empty spaces shaped exactly like our heroes. And Rick's solution is to move, to take Morty by the hand, cross into that dimension, bury the bodies of their own doubles, and walk into the dead men's house and take their places. Sit with what that means, because it is easy to say quickly and almost impossible to absorb. The family we have been watching, the kitchen, the parents worried about a retirement home, the whole domestic anchor of the series is abandoned in a single episode. It is left behind to rot inside a nightmare Rick has decided not to save. And the family we follow from that point forward, the one that carries the series through every season after, is not the original. It is a substitute. Our Morty is a boy who buried himself in his own backyard and moved into a stranger's bedroom that happened to be identical to his own. Our Rick is a man who solved an unsolvable problem by declaring the problem someone else's, in a world he no longer intended to occupy. This is why the question of where our Rick actually comes from is stranger than it first appears. The series gave us an origin, a garage, a home dimension, a set of specific people, and then it demonstrated that none of that is load-bearing. The dimension we treat as the anchor of the story is not the first one. It is at least the second, and the show never lets us fully forget that it could keep being replaced. The reason this particular reality functions as the anchor is not that it is original or protected or true. It is the anchor precisely because Rick chose it as a landing spot after abandoning another one. The stability of the setting is a decision Rick made under duress, not a fact of nature. And notice how much the pilot and this episode speak to each other once you place them side by side. In the first episode, the crossing between dimensions was played almost as convenience, a quick trip for seeds, the casual mobility of a man who is never truly stuck anywhere. By the sixth episode, that same mobility becomes an escape hatch from consequence itself. The seeds and the Cronenberg world are the same power used at two different scales. When the stakes are low, dimension hopping looks like resourcefulness. When the stakes are total, it looks like the most complete avoidance of responsibility imaginable. Rick did not change between those two episodes. Only the size of what he was fleeing changed. There is a quiet argument buried in the structure of these two episodes, and it is worth stating as opinion rather than fact, because the show never spells it out. The argument is that Rick's home, the emotional center the audience is invited to care about, is provisional by his own hand. The family did not choose Rick as their center. Rick chose them, or rather chose a copy of them, and could in principle choose again. The parents in the pilot worried about where to put Rick, whether the house had room for him, whether he belonged. The deeper truth the show reveals is that the house belongs to Rick more than he belongs to it, because he is the one who decides which house, in which dimension, gets to be the house at all. So when you ask where our Rick comes from, the honest answer is that the show refuses to give you a clean one. He comes from a garage, yes, he comes from a family that considered sending him away. But the dimension we anchor ourselves to, the one that feels like the real one, is a place he walked into over the graves of his own dead selves after letting another world die. That is the ground the rest of the series is built on. Not solid ground, chosen ground. And the choice was made by a man who had just proven, in the most literal terms available to fiction, that he could always choose differently. There is a particular kind of failure that a person can only commit if they believe failure does not truly count. Consider what Rick does in Rick Potion number 9. He has already made one mistake. A serum meant to solve a small inhuman problem, and that mistake has spread through the population like weather. So he mixes another antidote, and when that one only makes things worse, he tries a third, meant to undo them all. It does not undo anything. Instead, it turns nearly all of humanity into deformed, folded flesh creatures the show calls Cronenbergs, sparing only 3 people, Jerry and Beth and Summer Smith. The world outside the house is now ruined. And here is the moment worth slowing down for, because everything about who Rick is lives inside the choice he makes next. He does not try to reverse it. Think about what that means. Coming from a man whose entire identity is built on the claim that he can fix anything, that intelligence is a kind of sovereignty over reality itself. Faced with a planet he personally deformed, Rick does not sit down at the workbench and grind toward a cure. He reaches instead for his portal technology and begins searching the multiverse, not for a solution he might build, but for a solution that already exists somewhere else. He is looking for a reality where an alternate version of himself and an alternate Morty already solved the very problem he is standing inside of. This is the tell. To Rick, the correct response to breaking a world is not to repair the world. It is to go find a better copy. And he finds one. He locates a dimension where the other Rick and the other Morty succeeded, where the virus was cured and humanity was restored, and where, moments after that victory, both of those counterparts happened to die in a garage explosion. The timing is almost obscene in its convenience, and it knows as much. 2 fresh corpses, 1 working world, 1 empty house. So the real Rick and the real Morty step through a portal and take their places. They do not earn the fixed reality, they inherit it, from versions of themselves who did the work and then conveniently stopped existing at the exact right second. What they do next is the image the whole episode is built around. Before they can walk inside and begin their new lives, there are 2 bodies in the way, their own bodies, the dead doubles who cured the plague. So Rick and Morty carry those corpses into the backyard and bury them. They dig graves for themselves in the yard of a house that is not quite theirs, in a world that is not quite theirs, and then they go inside to live as if nothing has happened. Picture the ordinariness of it. A shovel, some dirt, a suburban lawn, and the person doing the burying is the person in the coffin. It is one of the strangest things this show ever put on screen, and it is played almost quietly. Morty cannot hold it together, and the episode is honest enough to let him break. When he sees his own burnt corpse, his own dead face, he panics, and the panic is the correct response, the human response. The response of someone who still believes that a self and a world are things that matter. Rick calms him. He does not deny what has happened. Instead, he explains, in effect, that there are infinite realities, that this is simply how the numbers work, that he found one where their counterparts had solved the problem and then died in a way that left the door open, and so they walked through it. The horror from Rick's point of view is not a horror at all. It is arithmetic. If everything that can happen does happen somewhere, then no single world is precious, because there is always another one down the shelf. And if worlds are not precious, then abandoning one is not a crime, it is a relocation. This is the angle I want to hold up to the light, because it is easy to watch this episode as a story about a mistake and a clever escape, and much harder to sit with what the escape actually reveals. Rick's willingness to discard an entire reality to save his own skin is not framed as a lapse or a moment of weakness. It is framed as a method. He treated his home dimension, the true original one, the one he was actually born into and lived in, as disposable the instant it became inconvenient. The wiki that tracks these details designates the reality they flee into as Dimension C-131, and gives it the plain, damning nickname the Replacement Dimension, while the Cronenberg-ravaged world they left behind is understood to be their genuine origin. Sit with those 2 names side by side. There is the real one, poisoned and abandoned, and there is the replacement, chosen precisely because someone else already fixed it. Rick did not lose his world, he upgraded away from it. And the cost of that method lands almost entirely on Morty, which is the part the show is quietly furious about. Rick has done this before, presumably, or something like it. He has the calm of a man for whom this is routine. Morty has not. Morty is a child who has just watched his own body go into the ground and been told that the appropriate emotional response is to understand statistics. The episode ends without giving him any relief from that. He sits on the couch of his new home in shocked silence, having abandoned the ruined world he came from and having buried his own body in the yard, and over that silence it plays "Look On Down from the Bridge" by Mazzy Star. There is no joke to close on. There is a boy who has learned that his home was never load-bearing, that his father figure will trade a whole reality the way another person would trade a broken appliance, and that he himself is, in some cold sense, replaceable, because a replacement is exactly what he just became. What makes the choice so unsettling is that it works. Nobody catches them. The new Beth and the new Jerry and the new Summer do not know the difference. Life resumes. And because it works, it establishes a rule that the series will spend years living under, which is that consequences, for Rick, are optional in a way they are not optional for anyone around him. He can always leave. He can always find the timeline where the problem is already solved. The people who cannot do this, the Mortys and the Beths and the Summers, are the ones who have to carry the weight of the worlds he walks out of. And it does not let that abandoned world simply vanish, which I think is the point. 2 seasons later, in the first episode of the 3rd season, The Rick Shank Redemption, that Cronenberg dimension returns. And the return is grim in a very specific way. It is Rick and Morty themselves who make that journey into the new dimension, and what they go there to do is bury the bodies of their dead alternate selves in the backyard, quietly taking their place in that world. So the abandoned reality becomes, in the end, a resource, a junkyard, a place you return to only to strip something useful off a body. That is the afterlife of a world Rick decided was not worth saving. It is not mourned and it is not repaired. It is scavenged. And if you want to understand how little a whole reality can be made to weigh against Rick's own convenience, that is the measure. He discarded it to save himself, and years later the only reason to go back is to take one more thing. The first season's 10th episode carries a title that plays on an old horror film, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, and it first reached audiences on the 7th of April, 2014. It was written by Ryan Ridley, with Steven Sandoval again directing, and it is the penultimate chapter of that opening year. The moment when the series stops treating Rick as a lone, eccentric genius and reveals that he is one of an uncountable number of himself. Up to this point, the premise had been intimate. A grandfather, a grandson, a garage, a universe. What this episode does is pull the camera back until the single figure becomes a population. And in doing so, it asks a question the series will spend years circling. If there are infinite Ricks, what makes any one of them matter, and what happens when they decide to govern one another? The engine of the plot is an accusation. Rick C-137, the Rick we have been following, is arrested and charged by something called the Trans-Dimensional Council of Ricks. The charge is murder. 27 alternate dimension Ricks are dead, and their Mortys have been taken, and the council believes our Rick is responsible. Consider the strangeness of that premise for a moment. A being is being prosecuted for killing versions of himself by a court composed entirely of other versions of himself. There is no outside authority here, no species above them, no God in the machine. The Ricks have looked at the problem of infinite Ricks and concluded that the only thing qualified to police a Rick is another Rick. That conclusion has an address. The council operates from a hidden interdimensional headquarters called the Citadel of Ricks, a place that shelters enormous numbers of alternate Ricks and their alternate Mortys. Picture what that means as a piece of world building. Somewhere outside ordinary space there is a city, and every citizen of that city is the same man, aged into the same lined face, carrying the same corrosive intelligence, and every one of them has brought along a small boy who is a variation on the same grandson. It is a society built by beings who each believe they are the smartest creature in any room, which is to say, it is a society founded on a contradiction. They needed a government because they could not trust each other, and they could not trust each other precisely because each of them knew exactly how a Rick thinks. Into this crowd, the episode introduces a figure who does not fit, and his not fitting is the whole point of him. Doofus Rick is an alternate dimension Rick who is regarded as dim-witted, and he is generally disliked by the other Ricks for it. Think about what that dislike reveals. In a population defined by shared genius, the one variable that draws contempt is a shortfall of that genius. The Ricks do not bond over being Rick. They rank one another, and the bottom of the ranking is reserved for the Rick who is gentle, slow, and kind. There is something sad in Doofus Rick, and the show seems to understand it, because he is treated by his own kind as an embarrassment rather than a brother. He is the same person as all of them, minus the cruelty, and that subtraction is what they cannot forgive. The murder mystery itself resolves into something more disturbing than a simple culprit. The actual killer is a cyborg, an evil Rick, with a receiver implanted in his brain. He is not acting on his own will. He is being controlled remotely, and the one holding the controls is a Morty, a small boy wearing an eye patch, and this Morty is the true mastermind. Turn that arrangement over slowly. The Ricks have built a civilization on the assumption that a Rick is the apex, the schemer, the one who acts and is never acted upon. The Morty is the accessory, the sidekick, the tool. And here, hidden inside their own paranoia, a Morty has taken a Rick and made him a puppet, has used a Rick's body to hunt and kill other Ricks, and has done it right under the noses of the smartest beings in the multiverse. The reason it works is buried in the episode as a piece of near-scientific explanation, and it reframes the entire relationship the series is built on. A Morty's brainwaves, the episode tells us, are complementary to a Rick's. They cancel out his genius-level neurological signature, cloaking him from interdimensional detection. That is the in-universe reason a Rick keeps a Morty. Not affection, not family, camouflage. The grandson is a device that hides the grandfather, a piece of biological stealth technology that happens to have a face and a voice and feelings. Every tender moment it has offered up to this point now carries a second meaning underneath it, colder than the first. Rick keeps Morty close because Morty makes Rick invisible, and the eye patch Morty has simply understood this truth better than anyone and turned it into a weapon. The closing image is one of the most patient pieces of setup the series ever attempts. Having orchestrated the killings, the eye patch-wearing Morty removes his mind control eye patch transmitter, and he crushes it underfoot, and then he vanishes into a crowd of refugee Mortis. He does not gloat, he does not explain, he simply becomes anonymous again. One small identical boy among a sea of small identical boys, and walks away undetected. The character later known as Evil Morty does not actually first appear here. That quiet unraveling belongs to a different episode entirely, called Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, where he first turns up simply as Eye Patch Morty, and the moment lands precisely because it does not announce itself. The series has spent an episode teaching you that Mortys are interchangeable background, and then it lets its most dangerous mind hide inside exactly that assumption. What I find genuinely striking, watching it years after the fact, is how completely this episode inverts the hierarchy the Ricks have built. They constructed a citadel, a council, a court, an entire apparatus to manage the danger of too many Ricks. They never once considered that the danger might come from below, from the small complementary creatures they carry around as camouflage and treat as luggage. Doofus Rick shows you that the Ricks punish weakness in their own kind. The Eye Patch Morty shows you what that blindness costs them. A civilization of geniuses, so busy watching each other that it never thought to watch the boy holding the leash. There is a version of Rick and Morty that people remember as pure comedy. The episode where the old man becomes a teenager and starts a garage band and dances in the hallway, and that memory is not wrong, but it is only the surface. The episode is called Big Trouble in Little Sanchez from the second season, and what happens inside it is stranger and quieter than the jokes suggest. Rick transfers his consciousness into the brain of a younger clone of himself. He does this in order to attend Harry Herpson High School alongside Morty and Summer. Consider the ordinariness of the reason. Not to conquer a galaxy, not to escape a government, to go back to high school. The younger clone body his mind now occupies is nicknamed Tiny Rick, And the procedure that makes the transfer possible carries a name that tells you everything about how Rick sees himself. It is called Operation Phoenix. A phoenix is the creature that burns and returns, the thing that refuses to end by starting over as itself. Rick has clearly prepared for his own death for a long time, and he has prepared for it not with acceptance, but with a workaround. Weigh that as a piece of character. This is a man who has built, in advance, a system for cheating the one limit no intelligence has ever escaped. And in this episode, he decides to spend it not on survival, but on nostalgia. It is worth being precise about what Tiny Rick is and what he is not, because the series has trained its audience to expect the multiverse answer. Across the series, whenever there is another Rick, that Rick usually comes from somewhere else, another timeline, another dimension, a copy that already existed. Tiny Rick is different. He is not a Rick fetched from a neighboring reality. He is a body grown from Rick himself, inhabited by Rick himself, a self-made double rather than a found one. The distinction matters for what goes wrong later. When you make your own younger self from scratch, you are not borrowing a person. You are creating one. And a created thing, given a brain of its own, may eventually want to keep it. The reason all of this begins is almost gentle, and it belongs to Summer. Her original request is for Rick to help protect her and Morty from a vampire who is posing as a gym teacher at their school under the name Coach Ferratu. That is the whole of the ask. She wants safety, and she wants it from the one member of the family who can actually provide it. Rick, rather than simply showing up as himself, uses the threat as the occasion for Operation Phoenix. The favor and the indulgence arrive folded together, which is a very Rick way to do a kind thing, wrapping it inside something he wanted to do anyway. The vampire is real. Coach Ferrato is revealed to be a vampire whose true name is Balik Alistane, and the three of them, Tiny, Rick and Morty, and Summer, track him down and kill him. In a more conventional episode that would be the climax, the monster hunted and destroyed, the school made safe again. Here it happens, and then the story keeps going. Because the monster was never the real problem. The real problem is the cure. Once the vampire is dealt with, there is no longer any reason for Rick to remain in the young body, and he does not want to leave it. What follows is a slow, almost imperceptible corruption, and the series stages it with unusual patience. Tiny Rick becomes popular at school. He lets his grandchildren ride his social coattails, so that for a while Morty and Summer are pulled along in the warmth of his sudden charm. It looks like generosity. Underneath it, something is failing. Summer begins to grow worried that Rick's original elderly body, the real one, is dying while it is left behind in stasis. This is the quiet horror at the center of the episode. The young body is having the time of its life precisely while the old body, the actual Rick, wastes away in a jar, forgotten by the very mind that used to live in it. Summer is the one who understands this first, and her attempt to fix it is where the episode turns cruel. She gets Tiny Rick expelled from school, reasoning that if the young life is taken away, he will have no reason to stay, and will finally switch back to his old body. It is a good plan. It is built on the assumption that some part of Rick still wants to come back. Instead of switching back, he retaliates. He publicly humiliates her. Sit with how much that costs. Summer began the episode asking her grandfather for protection, and now the thing she asked to be protected by has turned on her in front of everyone. The favor has become the threat. The reason he lashes out is the reason the whole thing has been building toward. The younger clone's brain has started to override Rick's original personality. This is the part his own careful planning never accounted for. A phoenix is supposed to be the same bird each time, but a brain is not a body. And a young brain full of dopamine and belonging does not simply carry an old man's mind, it begins to rewrite it. Rick's original consciousness does not vanish all at once. It is suppressed, pushed down beneath the surface of the happy teenager, and from underneath it starts to leak. It leaks through a drawing titled "Help Me, Morty and Summer," and it leaks through an original song called "Let Me Out." Both of these are the messages of a prisoner. The old Rick, buried inside the body he built to save himself, is scratching at the walls of his own escape plan. That image is the true subject of the episode, and it is why the comedy has a floor of dread beneath it. The trap here is not a cage or a dimension. It is pleasure. Rick is being erased by the simple experience of being young and liked, and the only part of him that objects is the part that is being erased. He can ask for help only in fragments, a picture, a song, because the mouth and the hands he is using belong more and more to someone else. The rescue is fitting, and it is one of the few times the series treats music as a literal key. Morty and Summer physically restrain Tiny Rick. They force him to listen to a specific song, Between the Bars by Elliott Smith. The choice is not incidental. It is a quiet, mournful song by an artist whose work is soaked in melancholy, and it does what the fun could not. It breaks through his defenses. The joy of being young had sealed the old mind away, and it takes sadness, real adult sadness, to crack that seal open. Rick's original consciousness reasserts control enough that it can be transferred back into his old body. The grandchildren save the grandfather by making him feel something the teenager was too happy to feel. Running quietly alongside all of this is the other half of the episode, and it rhymes with the main story in a way that is easy to miss. Rick sends Beth and Jerry to an off-planet marriage counseling service, one that advertises a 100% success rate. 2 versions of self-repair then, in 1/2 hour. Rick tries to fix his own mortality by building a better version of himself and nearly loses himself inside it. Beth and Jerry are handed a perfect fix for their marriage, sold on a promise of total success. The episode places these side by side without comment, and the arrangement asks a question it does not answer aloud. When someone offers you a flawless escape from the thing that is slowly killing you, whether that thing is age or a marriage, what exactly are you agreeing to let go of in exchange? While Rick and Morty are away, off on an adventure to Atlantis that the audience never actually sees, something strange happens to the show. It stops following its 2 leads entirely. The episode that aired on September the 10th, 2017, the 7th of the 3rd season and the 28th overall, opens instead on a place, and on a question that place has never been able to answer. The Citadel of Ricks has been rebuilt. It is holding a presidential election, and for a little under half an hour, the series turns its attention away from the smartest man in the universe to ask what happens when you take thousands of copies of that man and force them to live together as a society. The on-screen title card calls the episode Tales from the Citadel, though the official credited title is the Ricklantis Mix-Up. That small doubling is worth sitting with for a moment. The story is officially about the off-screen trip, the Atlantis Lark, the joke in the name. What it is actually about is everything the joke was designed to distract you from. Dan Guterman and Ryan Ridley wrote it, and Dominic Pulcino directed it, and by most accounts, the writing here is some of the sharpest it ever produced. There is one more detail about how it was made that changes how it feels to watch. Justin Roiland voiced very nearly every character in it himself, with only a few brief vocal contributions from other performers. Every citizen of this society, every candidate, every cop, every worker, is quite literally the same voice. The Citadel is a city with one man's throat. Consider what that means for a society. These are not different people who happen to be similar. They are the same person, endlessly reprinted and then sorted. Sorted into winners and losers, owners and workers, police and policed. The episode's genius is that it takes the series' central premise, that Rick is exceptional, that Rick is the exception to every rule, and it multiplies that premise until it collapses. If everyone is the exceptional man, then no one is. Somebody still has to run the assembly line. Somebody still has to walk the beat in the bad part of town. And it follows those somebodies with a seriousness it rarely grants even its heroes. Consider the factory first. There is a plant on the Citadel that makes Simple Rick's wafers, a snack product whose flavor comes from something genuinely disturbing when you say it plainly. The wafers are flavored with positive neurochemicals extracted from the memories of a captive Rick. This prisoner is nicknamed Simple Rick, and the thing being harvested from him is, in the language of the product, happiness itself. A specific happiness. The contentment of a Rick who chose an ordinary life, who is imagined sitting in a warm kitchen with his daughter, and whose warmth is drained out of him and pressed into a cookie so that other Ricks can taste, for a moment, the peace they gave up. The Citadel has found a way to industrialize the one thing Ricks are supposed to be too clever to want. Into this factory comes a worker, Rick J. 22, who is passed over for a promotion. What he does next is not clever and not a scheme. It is the oldest story there is. He destroys his assembly machine. He kills his supervisor. And he takes Simple Rick hostage, the captive at the literal center of the operation, the source of everything the factory sells. For a moment, the machinery of the place stops, and the man who runs the line has his hands around the thing that gives the line its meaning. It could be a story about a worker seizing the source of his own alienation. The episode does not let it stay that clean. A SWAT team arrives and, in the course of the standoff, kills Simple Rick. The hostage dies. The product line loses its single irreplaceable ingredient. And here the factory owner, a Rick who styles himself Rick Sanchez III, does something that tells you everything about how power works in this place. Publicly, he praises J22 as a hero. He gives the disruption a face the crowd can love. Then, in private, he stuns the man he just honored, and he begins harvesting J22's own happiness to replace the wafer flavoring that died with Simple Rick. The worker who rebelled against the machine becomes the machine's next raw material. The rebellion did not break the system. It fed it. And the praise, the public honoring, was simply the anesthetic applied before the extraction. That is the quietest horror the episode offers. The way a society can metabolize even its own uprisings, can find the nutritional content in dissent and press it into the next batch. Then there is the other thread, the one that borrows its shape from a film. The episode pairs a rookie cop Rick, idealistic, freshly convinced that the badge means something, with a cynical and corrupt veteran partner, and the twist is who that partner is. The veteran is a cop Morty. Sit with the inversion for a second. In every other hour of this show, a Rick is in charge and a Morty is dragged along, the older man steering the younger through danger the boy never chose. Here, the arrangement flips. The Morty is the seasoned one, the one who knows how the street really works, the one teaching the wide-eyed Rick how compromised the job actually is. The series has spent years training you to read the Rick as the authority. It hands the authority to the Morty and lets you feel how wrong it sits, and then asks you to notice that the wrongness was always arbitrary. They patrol a place called Mortytown, a slum on the Citadel populated by Mortis who have no Rick. Rickless Mortis. It is a detail the series delivers almost in passing, and it is one of the saddest ideas in the whole episode. A Morty without a Rick is not free. He is abandoned. He is surplus. The city has produced more Mortis than it has uses for, and it has swept the leftovers into a district and left them to rot. On patrol there, Cop Rick kills a member of a gang called the Mortytown Locos in self-defense, and then his partner does something that reframes the killing entirely. Cop Morty blows up a drug lab with the arrested gang members still inside it. The rookie's clean act of survival is followed immediately by the veteran's calculated erasure of witnesses and suspects both. One killing is a tragedy. The next is policy. The two of them go after a drug lord named Big Morty, and the confrontation sorts them the way the Citadel sorts everyone. Cop Rick refuses a bribe. Cop Morty has already, quietly, accepted it. The idealist and the cynic reach the same room and reveal that they were never on the same side, that the mentorship was a performance layered over a transaction. And then the veteran says the thing underneath all of it. Cop Morty admits regret over never having gotten to live a normal teenage life. That is the wound. Not greed, not cruelty for its own sake, but grief for an ordinary adolescence he was never allowed. The same ordinary life that Simple Rick, in the other story, was imprisoned for having chosen. The two threads rhyme without ever touching. Both are about the unbearable value of the plain life these copies were denied. What follows is quick and terrible. Cop Morty executes Big Morty, the drug lord, and then turns his gun on his own partner. Cop Rick kills Cop Morty in the exchange. And then, unlike almost anyone else in this episode, he does something the Citadel has no category for. He turns himself in to the arriving officers. He submits to the system rather than beating it or fleeing it, in a place built entirely out of a man defined by his refusal to submit to anything. One copy chooses to be accountable, and it plays less like heroism than like exhaustion, like the only clean act left available to someone who has watched every other option corrupt itself. Set the two stories beside each other and the design becomes visible. A worker who rebels and is consumed by the thing he rebelled against. A cop who stays honest and can do nothing with his honesty but surrender it to the same authorities who let Mortytown rot. Neither man wins. Neither man's virtue changes the machine. The election frames all of it, the promise that this society could choose its own direction, and the episode arranges its two long tragedies underneath that promise like a quiet argument that the choosing was never the point. The factory will make its wafers. The precinct will run its beat. The candidates will campaign. And the thousands of Ricks and the thousands of Mortys will go on governing each other in the only way a city of identical, exceptional men seems able to manage, which is by deciding which copies get to be the exception and which copies become the raw material. That the whole thing is one actor talking to himself only sharpens it. There is no outside to this society. No other kind of person could arrive to fix it. Every voice of authority and every voice crying out beneath that authority belongs to the same source, which means the cruelty and the abandonment and the occasional flicker of decency are all things this single person is doing to himself over and over at scale. The series usually asks what one Rick is capable of. For one episode, it asks what a whole civilization of them builds when left alone, and the answer is a factory, a slum, an election, and a very long silence where the two adventurers who were supposed to matter never appear at all. The third season of Rick and Morty opens with its central figure caged. Rick sits inside a Galactic Federation prison, and the show does something audacious with him. It gives us a genius already in captivity, already scheming, already several steps ahead of the walls around him. The episode is called The Rick Shank Rickdemption, written by Mike McMahon and directed by Juan Meza Leon, and it begins from a position of total defeat. Earth itself is under Galactic Federation control. The family is occupied. The man who built portal guns and treated whole dimensions as scratch paper is now a prisoner, and the plan he sets into motion is intricate, patient, and entirely his own. Think about what it means to start a season this way. Most shows would use a premiere to reassure you, to put the pieces back where you left them. This one does the opposite. It strands its most powerful character in a cell and lets the tension come from watching him work from the inside out. The escape is not a burst of action. It is a plan, and a plan implies foresight, and foresight is the very thing this episode is about to complicate. There is a strange piece of history attached to the way this episode arrived. It first aired unannounced on Adult Swim on April the 1st, 2017, as a surprise April Fool's Day premiere rather than a promoted broadcast. There was no marketing runway, no countdown, no billboard. The network simply put it on and let people find it. Because of that unannounced airing, the episode drew a strikingly small audience at its initial broadcast, and only grew modestly by the time of a later re-air. In the raw arithmetic of Nielsen ratings, that makes it one of the least watched episodes in the entire series' history. The 22nd episode overall, the premiere of a season fans had waited on for a long stretch, and on paper almost nobody was in the room when it began. There is something fitting about that quiet arrival. A story about hidden truths that itself slipped out through the side door. Back on the occupied Earth, the human cost of Rick's absence takes a smaller and more domestic shape. Morty and Summer argue about their grandfather. They are two children who have lived through what Rick has done and what Rick has left behind, and they do not agree on what he is or what he owes them. The series keeps returning to this, the idea that Rick is not a settled fact, but a subject of dispute, even inside his own family. The people closest to him cannot agree on his story. Hold on to that, because the episode is about to turn the disagreement into its entire structure. Inside the prison, the Federation sends in a specialist. A Galactic Federation agent named Cornelius Daniel interrogates the imprisoned Rick by linking into his mind to extract his memories about the portal gun. This is the machinery of the episode. Not a rack, not a threat, but a device that lets an interrogator walk directly into another person's recollections and look around. The Federation wants the secret of interdimensional travel, and it has decided the fastest way to that secret is to bypass Rick's words entirely and read the truth off his memory, as though memory were a locked drawer that only needs the right key. And here the series plants the idea that will unsettle everything after it. If an interrogation can enter a mind and pull memories out, then a mind can build memories to be found. The episode does not need to explain this at length. It simply lets you watch Rick move through the interrogation and, in one small and almost comic detail, reveal that the whole thing is staged. The tell is a fold. Somewhere inside the memory Rick has offered up, a version of Jerry appears, and Rick orders this Jerry to fold himself over 12 times. The simulated Jerry can only manage 6 folds. That is the crack in the glass. Rick smells the simulation not through some grand paradox but through a physical limit, the way a piece of paper can only be folded so many times before it will not fold again. The false Jerry cannot do what a real thing in a real world would strain against. The impossibility gives it away, and Rick knows in that instant that the memory the Federation is interrogating is not a memory at all. It is a set he has built for them to search. Sit with the elegance of that. The interrogator believes he is reading Rick's past. Rick has instead written a past for the interrogator to read, complete enough to be convincing. And the only reason we in the audience learn it is fabricated is that Rick lets a detail fail on purpose. He tests his own simulation against reality and lets it break. From this point forward, a quiet and genuinely destabilizing question hangs over the episode. If Rick can manufacture a memory this seamless, one that fools a mind-reading machine and the trained agent operating it, then how would anyone, including us, ever know when a Rick memory is real? That question does not stay abstract because of what is inside the fabricated memory. Within the sequence shown to the Federation, an alternate universe, Rick visits a young Rick, the one designated C-137, and tells him, in effect, that the true accomplishment is not teleportation but interdimensional travel. It plays like an origin. It has the shape of one, the older self or the parallel self arriving to hand the younger the insight that will define his life, the moment a man becomes the man he will be. It is the kind of scene a show usually treats as bedrock, the founding memory, the thing that explains everything after. Except we have already been told this memory is a performance. Rick built it. He staged the fold that fails, he can stage the visitation that inspires. So the scene arrives wrapped in doubt from the moment it appears. Is this how Rick actually discovered interdimensional travel? Or is it a story he assembled because he knew it was exactly the kind of origin the Federation would believe, would want, would stop digging once they found? The episode refuses to hand you the answer, and that refusal is the point of the chapter. It takes the single most load-bearing thing a character can have, the story of how they became themselves, and it removes the floor from under it. This is where the prison break stops being a prison break and becomes something closer to an argument about memory itself. Consider what the show has done in sequence. It has given Rick a family that cannot agree on who he is. It has put him inside a machine designed to read his true past. And it has revealed that the past the machine reads is a construction, indistinguishable from the real thing except where Rick chooses to let it fail. The 3 ideas press against each other. Summer and Morty argue over a grandfather whose own memories we now know cannot be trusted as evidence. The Federation extracts an origin that may be fiction, and the audience, who came to this for a genius and a portal gun, is told that the genius can rewrite the record of his own beginning. There is a real vulnerability hiding underneath the cleverness, and it is worth naming as opinion rather than fact. A man who can fabricate his memories well enough to fool an interrogation device is a man who may not fully trust his own. The line between the memories Rick invents for others and the memories Rick carries for himself becomes very thin. When you can build a perfect origin on demand, the true origin loses its privileged place. It becomes just one more version, no more solid than the counterfeit sitting beside it. That is the disquiet the fold releases into the rest of the story. Not merely that Rick lies to the Federation, but that the very idea of a single true Rick origin has been exposed as something that can be manufactured. The alternate universe Rick telling C-137 that interdimensional travel is the real achievement is, taken at face value, a lovely piece of mythology. A man being shown the door that will lead him out of his own universe and into all the others. But the episode has taught us to read it twice, once as origin and once as bait. The same scene can be the truth of how Rick became Rick, or the perfect lie designed to satisfy a captor and buy an escape. Both readings fit every frame. It does not choose, and by not choosing, it makes a larger claim, that with a mind like this one, the question of which version was ever true may not have a stable answer at all. So the escape plan and the memory are the same object. Rick breaks out of the Federation prison by breaking the reliability of his own past, offering a story convincing enough to walk through and false enough to walk away from. What he leaves behind, for the family arguing about him and for us watching him, is a version of his origin that we can never again treat as bedrock. The premiere almost nobody saw at first turns out to be the one that tells you the ground beneath this character was never solid to begin with. There is a figure in this show who understands the shape of the whole thing before anyone else does, and he understands it because he has been standing outside of it, looking in, for longer than anyone realizes. To trace him across his appearances is to watch a single argument being made slowly, patiently, over years of its running time, and the argument is this, that the multiverse Rick and Morty move through is not neutral. It is rigged. It was built to keep one being at the center and everyone else in orbit. The figure who makes this argument is a Morty, and he is usually called Evil Morty, though part of what makes him unsettling is how little that name explains. He arrives first in Close Rick Counters in the 10th episode of Season 1, and he arrives disguised as a victim. What the audience sees at first is a captor called Evil Rick, a Rick who has been conducting a manhunt across the Council of Ricks, a campaign that has already killed 27 Ricks and enslaved hundreds of Mortys. Beside this Evil Rick stands a small, quiet, one-eyed sidekick, a Morty in an eye patch, apparently the most enslaved of all, the personal servant of the monster running the whole operation. Think about how that framing works on you. You are trained by every story you have ever heard to read the child at the villain's side as the thing to be rescued. It knows this, and it uses it. The twist undoes the arrangement completely. Evil Rick is not the mind behind the killings. Evil Rick is a mindless cyborg, a remote-controlled body, and the transmitter running him the whole time is hidden inside the eye patch of the small Morty standing beside him. The servant was the master. The least powerful figure in the room was the one in control, and he had arranged the scene precisely so that no one would look at him. That is the first thing to understand about this character. His weapon is not intelligence in the way a Rick's is. His weapon is that no one in this universe believes a Morty can be dangerous, and he has learned to hide inside that assumption. The ending of that episode is the quietest and most important image in his entire arc, and it is easy to miss. After the Council of Rick soldiers find the transmitter inside the dead cyborg, after they understand that a Morty was behind everything, they turn to look for him and he has already gone into plain sight. He reaches up, removes his own eye patch, drops it to the ground and stomps on it. Then he blends anonymously into the crowd of rescued Mortis, who all look exactly like him. He does not flee. He does not fight. He becomes indistinguishable from the very victims he was accused of exploiting, and the system that hunts him has no way to tell one Morty from another. He escapes not by being extraordinary, but by being on the surface, identical to everyone the Ricks consider disposable. He is gone for a long stretch of the show after that, and when he returns, in the Ricklantis mix-up in Season 3, the series hides him again, this time from the audience directly. By most accounts, the official synopsis for that episode focuses on Rick and Morty encountering a visiting Rick and Morty from the Citadel of Ricks before the pair head off to Atlantis. That is all it says. It frames the entire Citadel storyline as a side detour, a B-plot, something happening at the edge of the real episode, and it never names Evil Morty at all. This is worth sitting with, because the misdirection is not only inside the fiction now, it has leaked out into the marketing. The series is doing to its viewers exactly what Evil Morty does to the Ricks. It is telling you to look at Atlantis so that you do not look at the small figure moving through the Citadel. And what he does inside that episode is the natural extension of the eye patch. The Citadel of Ricks holds its first democratic election, its first attempt at self-government, and Evil Morty runs in it incognito, under an assumed campaign persona, a candidate whose real identity no one knows. His platform is class. He gives speeches about the division between the elite Ricks and Mortys at the top of the Citadel and everyone else beneath them, and that message wins him public support, because the resentment he is describing is real. The genius of it and the cruelty of it is that he is telling the truth. The Citadel is a class system. The Mortys are an underclass. He wins by naming a genuine injustice, and then, once he has won, he reveals himself as Evil Morty and immediately orders the execution of the council members who opposed him. The democracy was a door. He walked through it and closed it behind him. You can read this as pure cynicism, the tyrant who used a just cause as a ladder. I think the series wants something more complicated than that. He did not lie about the rigged nature of the place. He simply understood, earlier than anyone, that the injustice was too deep to vote away, and that the same clarity which let him see it would let him rule it. Everything before this is prologue to the speech he gives in Rick and Morty, the Season 5 finale, because that is where he finally says out loud what he has known since the eye patch. He tells Rick C-137 what the Central Finite Curve actually is. It is a wall, he says, in effect, a wall deliberately built around infinity. Out of all the endless universes that could exist, the curve fences off only the ones where no mind ever outranks a Rick. Every other kind of universe, every reality where a Rick is ordinary or absent or outmatched, has been walled out. What is left inside is a garden pruned to a single condition: Rick on top. Every Rick you have ever seen in this show, including the one you have been following as the hero, has been living his whole life inside that fence, and never knew the fence was there. Then he says the thing that reframes his own name. He says that every version of himself and every version of Rick has spent every version of their lives inside what he calls one infinite crib built around one infinite baby. That is his description of the whole multiverse. Not a cosmos, a nursery. Countless Mortys arranged in endless orbit around countless Ricks, and every one of those Ricks is, to him, a baby. An enormous, helpless, self-obsessed infant that the entire structure of reality exists to cradle. And he defines his evil precisely. He says that being sick of him, sick of Rick, is what makes him evil. Not cruelty, not ambition. Exhaustion he is called evil because he refused to keep loving the baby the crib was built for. That is the heart of what this character reveals, and it is why he matters beyond a good twist. The series has spent seasons letting you enjoy Rick as the smartest man alive, and Evil Morty's answer is that the title is not an achievement, it is a filter. Rick holds that rank only because someone built a universe small enough for it to be true, and a Rick who never questions that is exactly the mediocre, comfortable, cradled thing the system was designed to produce. Every Rick kept inside the curve is kept deliberately mediocre, kept from ever meeting a mind that would humble him, and the one Rick who feels special is special only inside a rigged sample. At the climax of that episode, he stops arguing and acts. He overcharges the Citadel's dimensional drive and uses it to blast a hole straight through the Central Finite Curve, and he escapes through it into the wider multiverse beyond, the real infinity, all the universes the wall was built to exclude. Rick cannot follow him. For the first time, the character who is always ahead is not ahead within the game. He has left the board entirely. The consequences of that hole outlast him, which is its own kind of statement. In Rick Mort, in Season 6, the rift he tore on his way out is still there. Scrambling portal travel across realities, a wound in the structure that nobody can close, until a race of intelligent dinosaurs repairs it near the end of the episode. He is not even present for that. His absence is doing the damage. And then, in a later episode called Unmortrican, Rick himself deliberately fractures the Central Finite Curve again, this time to smoke out Rick Prime, and the shockwave from that fracture travels all the way out to Evil Morty in his self-imposed exile beyond the wall, and it draws him back. The being who walked away from the crib is pulled, briefly, to the edge of it once more. To help fight the one Rick even he seems to consider worth stopping. He left because he was sick of Rick. He returns, it turns out, for the sake of ending the worst Rick of all. For most of the show's life, the Rick who killed Rick's family was a wound and not a character. He existed only in the way a scar exists, as evidence of something that happened long ago and off-screen. The Season 5 finale, the one titled Rick and Morty, is where that changes. Morty uses a brain scan device, and the act of scanning triggers a flashback, and inside that flashback, the series finally confirms what it had circled for years. Rick's original wife, Diane, and his original daughter, the first Beth, were really killed. They were not lost to grief or metaphor. They were killed by a Rick from another dimension, a version of himself. After this, Rick had refused to join a criminal alliance that the killer Rick was assembling. Consider the shape of that. The thing that ends Rick's first family is not a monster from outside his own kind. It is a Rick who wanted a partnership, was told no, and answered the refusal with a bomb. Diane and Beth die by a bomb, and that single event is what originally drives Rick C-137 out of his home dimension. It is why he builds the portal gun in the first place. Every green portal in the series, every casual hop across realities, every bored genius shrug at the infinite, traces back to a man who lost his family and decided the only response large enough was to make the whole multiverse walkable. The engine of the entire premise turns out to be a personal murder. What it does with this reveal is quieter than you might expect, and that quiet is the point. It does not immediately hand you the killer. It gives you the fact of him, the weight of him, and then it lets you sit with the knowledge that somewhere in the endless branching of Ricks there is one specific Rick who is the cause of all of it. The origin is no longer diffuse. It has an author. The naming and the surfacing of that author come at the start of the next season. He is called Rick Prime, sometimes Prime Rick, and it matters where the series chooses to place his arrival. He is not introduced by name in the third episode of Season 6, the domestic one called Bethic Twinstinct, where the Smiths celebrate one of their favorite holidays and Summer and Morty vanish into a new, ultra-realistic video game console. That episode is worth holding in your mind precisely because Rick Prime is absent from it. The family carries on with its ordinary appetites and distractions, a holiday, a game so immersive that two of the kids disappear inside it, while the man responsible for the family's deepest fracture is nowhere in the frame. It can do that. It can let a whole episode pass in comfort because it has already planted him elsewhere. Where it plants him is the post-credits scene of the Season 6 premiere, the episode called Solarix, which aired in early September of 2022. Post-credits is a strange and deliberate real estate for a character of this importance. It is the space usually reserved for a throwaway gag, a small absurd button on the episode. And into that space the show slides its most serious antagonist. A Jerry from a Cronenberg dimension finds Rick Prime. This Jerry pretends to propose an alliance, and then he slashes Rick Prime's throat. Think about what that scene is designed to test. A Jerry is the series' standard unit of harmlessness, the man who fails, the punchline. When a Jerry cuts your throat and you are meant to laugh, the whole grammar of the series says the moment should collapse into comedy. But Rick Prime survives the attack. He survives having his throat slashed, and then he kills that Jerry. In the location where you expect a joke, the show refuses to let you have one. It uses its own comedic reflex against you, and by surviving the setup, Rick Prime is established as a genuine physical threat rather than a joke. That is a careful choice. The other rival Ricks over the years had been gags in one form or another, versions of the self played for irony. This one is not permitted to be funny. By the time the show is ready to actually hunt him, in the 5th episode of Season 7, Unmortrican, which aired in November of 2023, the alliances have rearranged themselves into something almost unthinkable. Rick, Morty, and Evil Morty team up. Evil Morty, the long game villain of the whole series, the one who wanted only to escape the show's own logic, stands beside the protagonists to confront Rick Prime. Enemies collapse into partners because the target is larger than any of their private feuds. And here the series raises the stakes of what Rick Prime is by revealing what he has built. He has made the Omega device, a weapon that can erase every version of a person across the entire multiverse at once. Understand the scale of that. Not a single killing, not a family in one dimension, but the total deletion of a soul from every reality that ever held it. He demonstrates it, and the demonstration is almost cruel in its casualness. He erases every version of a character called Slow Mobius, who is Rick's uncle. A relative. Chosen, one suspects, precisely because he is a relative, so that the weapon is introduced not as an abstraction, but as another act of familial erasure, the same crime as the original bomb scaled up to infinity. What follows is one of the more morally complicated sequences the series has staged. Evil Morty incapacitates Rick Prime. Then he takes the Omega device, And before he destroys it, he scans its schematics. That small detail carries a great deal. He does not simply want the weapon gone. He wants what it knows, a record of how to erase across all realities, kept for himself even as he removes it from the world. And having disarmed Rick Prime, Evil Morty makes a choice that is not mercy and is not quite justice either. He allows Rick C-137 to beat Rick Prime to death with his own hands. Sit with the mechanics of that. The most technologically extreme confrontation in the series, a fight over a device that could unmake anyone everywhere, ends with no device at all. It ends with fists. The man who spent his life building portals and superweapons because a bomb took his family is finally given the thing he built all of it to reach. And the show strips away every tool and lets him do it with his hands. There is no portal, no gun, no clever escape. It is the crudest possible act performed by the most advanced possible man. My own reading is that the show is arguing something austere here, that all of Rick's genius was only ever a very long detour toward a physical act he could have wanted from the first day, and that getting there does not resolve him. It empties him. The season does not let him rest on that either. The finale, Fear No Mort, sends Rick and Morty into a place called the Fear Hole, where they must learn to overcome their greatest fears and confront what it is like to live with themselves. That framing lands differently once you have watched Rick beat his rival to death. The external enemy is gone. The Rick who authored the wound is no longer out there in the multiverse to be chased. What remains is the harder thing, the self that has to keep living after the chase is over. The fear that was never really about another Rick at all. The series spent 2 seasons building a genuine rival, and then, having let Rick destroy him by hand, it turns him inward and asks whether he can survive his own company. For most of its existence, the writing staff behind Rick and Morty has treated the multiverse less as a gift than as a problem to be managed, and if you listen to the people who actually assembled it, that tension is not hidden. Dan Harmon, the co-creator, described the recurring difficulty in plain terms. The trouble with an infinite number of universes, as some fans and critics have put it, is that the moment you try to tell a story that matters, that carries weight and consequence, some part of your brain raises its hand and asks whether there are not already infinite evil Mortys out there anyway. The logic of infinite copies is corrosive. It eats at stakes from underneath. If everything that can happen has already happened somewhere, then nothing that happens here can quite be made to count, and a show that runs on caring about its characters cannot afford to let that thought win. Scott Marder, who served as showrunner, put the same worry from the practical side of the writer's room. Multiverse storylines, he said, are super challenging, and whenever the writers dip a toe into that water, it can easily spin out. He was not speaking metaphorically about difficulty for its own sake. He meant the labor of it, the bookkeeping, the need to track every timeline carefully so the whole thing does not collapse into sloppiness. Picture what that means for the people doing the work. Every branch you open is a branch you now have to remember, and every rule you bend is a rule someone in the audience will hold you to later. The freedom the premise seems to promise is, from the inside of the process, mostly a growing pile of things that can go wrong. Harmon has been asked, more than once, what advice he would give to other writers reaching for the same tool. And his answer was a joke that carried a real opinion inside it. He told them, in effect, to abandon the concept altogether and move on to Bitcoin instead. It is a punchline, and he meant it as one, but the punchline only works because he genuinely finds infinite universe premises unwieldy to write. You do not warn people away from something you consider easy. The humor is the pressure release for a frustration that is entirely sincere. And yet the multiverse stayed, because it also did something the show could not otherwise do. Justin Roiland, the other co-creator, described it in a phrase that is almost disarmingly honest. The multiverse, he said, is the show's big cheat code. Having multiverses, he explained, is something the series has leaned into. And the reason is that it lets the writers make drastic, irreversible-looking changes to characters while keeping the core show intact. A version of Rick can die. A version of Morty can turn out to be a monster. The house can burn down. And next week, the house is still standing, because the one that burned was never quite the only one. That is the cheat. It buys the drama of permanence without paying the price of it. So you have a premise that is simultaneously a cheat code and a trap, a tool that grants total freedom and, in granting it, threatens to make everything meaningless. The staff's response to this was not to indulge the freedom, but to fence it in on purpose. Harmon has talked about the series deliberately setting itself rules, and the example he gives is telling. The writers agreed, he said in effect, to make sure they never do the episode that shows why Rick is Rick, the origin, the wound, the explanation for the man. That restraint is not timidity. It is a kind of savings account. By refusing to spend the answer, they keep it valuable, so that if the rule is ever broken, the breaking will feel earned and deliberate rather than random. Discipline first, so that the eventual departure from discipline can mean something. Underneath all of this sits a fear that Harmon named directly, and it is a larger fear than any single episode. The writers, he said, are guided by a worry about wasting an opportunity, the opportunity to have a show that could last forever and be eternally limitless. They did not want to be the ones who, as he put it, screw up the audience's first experiment with giving a television show total narrative carte blanche. Sit with that phrasing for a moment. He is not describing a normal cartoon. He is describing something closer to a trust, a rare permission granted by an audience willing to let a story do anything at all, and he is describing the responsibility of not squandering it. The limits on the multiverse were not imposed because the writers lacked imagination. They were imposed because the writers believed the freedom was precious enough to ration. What is remarkable is that the show did not keep this reasoning off-screen. It built the same argument into its own fiction. Inside the story, the Central Finite Curve is a containment field engineered by the Council of Ricks, and its function is exactly the function the writers described for themselves. It walls off the multiverse. It limits the endless spread of possible realities down to the still infinite but now bounded set of universes in which no one ever outthinks a Rick. Every timeline where Rick is a nobody, where Rick is ordinary, where someone else holds the genius, is fenced outside the curve and left out of play. This is the series explaining in its own vocabulary why not every conceivable timeline shows up in the plot. The bookkeeping that Martyr worried about, the infinite evil Mortys that Harmon could not stop imagining, are held at bay by a piece of in-universe machinery that does the same job the writer's self-imposed rules do. The curve is the discipline made literal and painted onto the wall of the world, which makes it deeply significant and not at all accidental that the curve is the thing that finally comes down. At the end of the Season 5 finale, the episode titled Rick Mirai Jack, Evil Morty destroys the Central Finite Curve. That wall, which limited the multiverse to Rick-dominated realities, is torn open, and the show lets its own containment field fail on purpose. If you remember that the curve stood in for the writers' rationing of their own freedom, then its destruction reads as the series choosing, at least once, to spend the thing it had been saving. The people who wrote it were clear about why. In the official Inside the Episode commentary for that finale, the writer Jeff Loveness described Evil Morty as being, in effect, like a Zoomer growing up in late-stage capitalism. Someone who looks at the Rick-dominated system he was born into, decides it is broken, and concludes that it needs to be torn down rather than reformed. That was the stated justification from the room for ending the containment rule. The character who breaks the wall is not written as a simple villain, but as the logical product of a rigged system. Someone who has done the math on a world where every game was always about serving Rick and has decided the only honest move is to burn the board. The series spent years explaining, both in interviews and in its own machinery, why it kept the multiverse fenced. Then it let a character make the argument for taking the fence down and let him win. That is not the multiverse turned into a toy box. It is the opposite. It is a show that treated its own unlimited premise as something dangerous enough to guard. And that, when it finally opened the gate, made sure the opening was an argument rather than an accident. There is a version of Rick and Morty that you cannot watch. You can only play it, and only if you owned a phone in the early months of 2016. On January the 13th of that year, a mobile game called Pocket Mortys arrived worldwide for iPhone and Android devices, built by a small team of studios and put out under the Adult Swim Games label. It was, on its surface, a joke, A parody of Pokemon, dressed in the show's colors, playable in the small hours while you waited for something. And yet, without anyone framing it this way, it became one of the largest engines the franchise ever built for manufacturing Ricks who do not exist anywhere else. Consider how the game works, because the shape of the thing matters. You play as Rick. Not a Rick, but the Rick. Your Rick. The one the game hands you, and your task is to move through the dimensions catching wild mortis. Not with a red and white ball, but with something the game calls a manipulation chip, which is a joke about consent and ownership folded into a single item name that the game never pauses to explain. You battle trainers. Some of them are aliens, many of them are other Ricks, pulled from other dimensions. Each one a slightly different arrangement of the same lined face and the same blue hair. The premise of the whole adventure is that the Council of Ricks has taken your portal gun, and will not return it until you prove yourself. You earn that proof by defeating the Ricks who stand between you and them, collecting their badges the way a Pokemon trainer collects gym badges, until at last you face the 6-head Ricks of the Council itself. Think about what that structure requires. To build a game about defeating Ricks, the designers needed Ricks to defeat, dozens of them. And the show, however many alternate Ricks it had shown on screen by then, could not supply enough. So the game invented them. This is the part that interests me most, and it is easy to miss while you are tapping through battles half asleep. Every trainer you beat, every variant you unlock is a small act of authorship happening outside the television show, adding to the population of a multiverse the writers never sat down to design. A collector's guide published online once tried to count the distinct Rick variants a dedicated player could gather, and put the figure at roughly 43 of them. 43 versions of one man, obtainable through 4 separate systems. Some were simply free, given to you, or set as defaults. Some were earned through combat against the Council. Some were bought with the game's ordinary currency, called schmeckles, a word the series itself coined for money. And the rarest were locked behind a premium currency, tickets from a place called Blips and Chits, which is the arcade the show once used for a single strange interlude. The game took that arcade's name and turned it into a paywall. There is something honest in that if you sit with it. A show about a man who monetizes everything, sold back to you as a game that monetizes the man himself. Look closely at the ones you earn by fighting, because these are the purest inventions. Defeat one council member and you unlock Greaser Rick. Defeat a second and you receive Karate Rick. Then, in order, Beefcake Rick, Vaporware Rick, a figure named Rick Sanchez, and finally, for the 6th, Winner Rick. None of these men appear in the television series. They exist only here, as rewards, as costumes hung on the frame of the character. And notice the logic of the sequence. It moves from a 1950s archetype, the greaser, through a martial artist, through a bodybuilder, into Vaporware Rick, whose name gestures at a whole aesthetic of nostalgia and abandoned technology, and lands on Winner Rick, a name so blunt it almost refuses interpretation. Each is a costume idea more than a character, but strung together in that order, unlocked one by one as you climb, they form a small, unwritten mythology. 6 Ricks who were born to be beaten in order to reach. The Ricks you buy tell a slightly different story. For 2,000 schmeckles each, the game will sell you Beard Rick, Flat Top Rick, Four Eyes Rick, Mustache Rick, and Bald Rick. Read those names again and notice what they are. They are not personalities, they are grooming choices. A beard, a haircut, a pair of glasses, a mustache, a bare scalp. The game is charging you 2,000 units of fictional money to change one feature of the same face, which is, when you think about it, exactly what an alternate universe is under the show's own rules. A single variable altered, everything else held constant. The game has stumbled into a very literal illustration of its parent show's central idea. Infinity is not infinite invention. Infinity is the same man with a different mustache over and over, priced individually. And then, at the top, behind the premium tickets, sit the rarest of all. 10 Blips and Chits tickets will buy you Miami Rick, or Robot Rick, or Shibuya Rick, named for a district of Tokyo, or Superfan Rick, or a figure called simply Rick 800, though of course the game writes that number differently than I am permitted to here. None of these 5 has ever walked through a scene of the television show. They are the aristocracy of a fictional class system, the versions you are least likely to ever hold, and their rarity is the only thing that makes them special, because in every other respect they are still just Rick. Miami Rick is Rick somewhere warm. Robot Rick is Rick made of metal. The scarcity is manufactured, the character underneath unchanged. There is one more worth naming on its own, because it occupies two positions at once. Bubblegum Rick, an invention of the game entirely, can be bought for a single Blips and Chits ticket, the cheapest of the premium purchases. But before you can buy him, the game uses him. Bubblegum Rick is the first boss you face, so the very first opponent placed in your path, the one who teaches you that other Ricks are the obstacle, is a character who does not exist in the series and never will, and who is later sold back to you for one ticket, as if to close a loop. You defeat the idea, then you own the idea. Later, in October of that same year, an update numbered 1.7 added something that made the whole collection turn strange. It introduced Rick costumes. From then on, any alternate Rick you had unlocked could be worn by your own player character, applied by trading with a shopkeeper the game names Salesman Rick, which means the game dissolved the line it had been drawing all along. The Ricks you fought, the Ricks you bought, the Ricks you were, all became interchangeable skins on the same body. You could go into the world dressed as Greaser Rick, or Miami Rick, or the mouse-dashed one you paid 2,000 schmeckles for, and you would still be you, still the Rick the game handed you at the start. Every version of Rick, the phrase promises. And here is a corner of the franchise where every version means 43 men who share one face, most of them born inside a phone, sold to you in 4 different currencies, and, at the end, wearable as clothing. The series asked what it would mean for a person to be infinite. The game, without meaning to, answered, it would mean a catalog. It would mean a price list. It would mean the same tired genius again and again, waiting to be collected. There is a question that the show's most devoted viewers have argued over for years, and it is a strange one, because it sounds simple and refuses to stay simple. Which Rick is the real Rick? Which one is the original, the default, the true article from which all the others are copies? The wiki editors have their catalogs and their citations. The fandom threads run for pages. And the honest answer, the one the series itself seems most comfortable with, is that the question was built to have no clean answer. Consider where the confusion begins. In Close Rick Counters, a multiversal body called the Council of Ricks catalogs the many variants of the same man by dimensional designation. It is a bureaucracy of Ricks, sorting Ricks. And in that catalog, the show's protagonist is formally identified as Rick Sanchez of Dimension C-137. That label stuck. Fans took it as a name, almost a title, the way you might say a knight is of a certain house. For a long stretch of the series' life, C-137 simply meant our Rick, the one we follow, the one whose kitchen we keep returning to. But hold that designation up to the light, because something happened 4 episodes earlier that undermines the whole idea of a single, stable protagonist. In Rick Potion number 9, Rick and Morty attempt to fix a love potion that has spiraled out of control, and the fix goes catastrophically wrong. Every human on Earth, except for their own family, mutates into a monster, the twisted creatures the show calls Cronenbergs. Rick does not repair the damage. He does something colder and more revealing. He and Morty abandon that dimension entirely and cross into an identical-looking one where the same outbreak had already been solved, and there they bury their own dead counterparts and take their places at the dinner table. Think about what that does to the question of the real Rick. The Rick and Morty who appear in every episode after that 6th one are, strictly speaking, not the same 2 individuals who appeared in the first 5. They are new arrivals wearing the lives of the dead. The show never undoes this. It simply carries on, and most viewers carry on with it, half forgetting that the continuity of the character they love has already been severed once, early, almost casually. So when the Council later stamps our man as Rick of C-137, there is already a crack running underneath the label. Which C-137 Rick? The one who fled, or the one who moved in? That crack widened into a canyon in the later seasons, and this is where the fandom arguments truly begin to boil. To follow it, you have to go back to a memory. In the 3rd season premiere, the Rick Shank Rickdemption, Rick's memory is shown to the Galactic Federation, and in that memory, a version of Rick kills his wife Diane and his daughter Beth. For years, that memory sat in a peculiar limbo. Was it true? Was it a fabrication Rick had planted, a piece of theater for his captors? The kind of lie he tells so fluently that even the audience cannot be sure. The series let the doubt hang there, deliberately, for 2 seasons. Then, in the 5th season finale, Rick Morty Jack, the doubt is answered and the shape of everything changes. Rick reveals to Morty that his years-long, multiverse-spanning campaign of killing alternate Ricks was never random cruelty and never simple sport. It was a hunt. He was searching for one specific Rick, the one who murdered Diane and Beth, and he was willing to work through countless versions of himself to find him. The killer has a name now, or at least a designation the fans would seize on: Rick Prime. The memory from the 3rd season was real, and the 5th season finale confirms it and names the man behind it. Now sit with the irony that the wiki editors sit with. For years, the community treated C-137 as the prime Rick, the origin point, the default from which the multiverse of Ricks radiates outward. And here the series introduces an actual figure called Prime. And he is not our Rick at all. He is the thing our Rick has been chasing. The word that fans used loosely as a compliment, prime meaning first and truest, turns out to belong to the antagonist. It is a small linguistic trap, and the show springs it with evident pleasure. Rick Prime does not die in Rick Morty Jack, despite that episode finally laying his backstory bare. The revelation and the reckoning are held apart. He is formally introduced by name as a recurring antagonist in the premiere of the 6th season, Solarix, and it is there that the arguments over identity reach their most disorienting turn. Because Solarix reveals that the show's Rick, the one from C-137, is not the biological grandfather of the Morty and Summer we have watched grow up. Rick Prime is. Rick Prime fathered the Beth that belongs to this family, the Prime Beth, before a dimensional swap rearranged the relationships and placed C-137's Rick into the grandfather's chair. Read that slowly, because it rewires the family we thought we understood. The bond at the center of the whole series, the grandfather and the grandson, is revealed to rest on a substitution. Our Rick is hunting the man whose blood actually runs in the children he has raised. The villain is not only the murderer of his wife and daughter, he is, in the literal genealogical sense, the true grandfather of the show's Morty. Our Rick is the imposter in his own family, and the show has been telling us as much since that 1st season swap, when a Rick first took a dead Rick seat at a dinner table. The 6th season also does something the wiki editors are careful to note, something that tidies one confusion while deepening another. It establishes that dimension C-137, the home of the mainstream Rick and Morty, and the Cronenberg dimension, the home of Rick Prime, are 2 different and specific universes. They are not the same place. This matters because it means Rick Prime and our Rick are not merely 2 versions of one man from one origin. They come from distinct points on the map. The neat idea of a single C-137 spawning all the rest does not hold. There are separate homes, separate histories, separate Beths, and this is where the paper trail itself begins to contradict the paper trail, which is exactly the sort of thing that keeps a wiki community awake. There is an interactive special, Rick and Morty, Rick's New Hat, and in it the Cronenberg dimension that the pair abandoned back in the 1st season is referred to as World C-137. But the main show, in its later and more careful continuity, uses C-137 as the designation for the protagonist's actual home dimension, the place they came from, not the ruined place they left behind. The same code points at 2 different worlds depending on which piece of the franchise you consult. Fans and wiki editors have flagged this as a genuine continuity inconsistency, and they are right to. It is not a fan misreading. It is the material disagreeing with itself. You can see why no clean answer survives. The label C-137 was applied by an in-universe bureaucracy in the 1st season, then complicated by a dimension swap in the same season, then reassigned in a spin-off, then redefined by the 6th season, all while the word Prime migrated from an honorific the fans invented to the proper name of the villain. Every time the community reached for a fixed point, the series moved it. My own reading, and I offer it only as a reading, is that this was never carelessness dressed up as depth. The instability is the point. A show whose founding premise is infinite versions of the same two people cannot honestly hand you one authoritative version and call it the real one. To do so would be to betray its own arithmetic. But when the argument flares up again, C-137 against Rick Prime against the notion of a default Rick, notice what it has actually given you. It has given our Rick his revenge at last, 2 seasons after the hunt was revealed, in the 5th episode of the 7th season, Unmortrican, where he finally kills Rick Prime. But it never gives you the certainty underneath. It never tells you that the Rick you love is the original. It tells you instead that he took someone's place, that he is not the grandfather he appears to be, and that even his dimensional address is a matter the franchise cannot keep straight. The ambiguity is not a gap in the record. It is the record. Every version of Rick begins from the same wound, and that is what all of this has been circling. A man who looked at the whole of existence, every timeline and every copy of himself and everyone he loved, and decided that intelligence was the only thing worth becoming, because intelligence was the only thing that could not be taken from him the way his family was taken. Consider what that means. The genius, the portal gun, the endless variants scattered across the Central Finite Curve, and the council he built and then tore down, the version who drinks to forget the version he killed, the one who plays the fool, the one who plays the god, all of them are the same refusal dressed in different despair. Rick becomes many so that he never has to be the one small, grieving man he started as, and the show understands this. It hands him every power a person could want, and shows, again and again, that none of it fills the hole where an ordinary life used to be. That is why the cleverest man in any reality keeps building machines that make him feel, and keeps breaking them. So when you picture Rick, do not picture the science. Picture the garage at night, the flickering light, an old man hunched over a workbench that could unmake the stars, still trying to solve the one equation that has no answer, while somewhere upstairs a family he pretends not to need is finally asleep. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.